And this morning, we do want to take a closer look at the state of our military and the challenges all the branches are now facing.
Joining us now is Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, now retired from the U.S. Army and a senior fellow and defense expert at Defense Priorities, and Leo Shane, the deputy editor for Military Times. Thank you both for joining us, and Lieutenant, thank you for your service. Leo, I'll start with you. One of the biggest challenges the U.S. military faces is bringing in new recruits. Last year, let's talk a little bit of numbers here. The Army missed its recruitment goal by 15,000 people. The Air Force expected to miss their recruiting goal as well this year by 10%. So what is it that's making recruitment such a challenge right now?
Well, that's the question, right? They're trying to figure out what they can do, what the military can do to bring in more folks. There's a lot of fight up on Capitol Hill about whether or not this has to do with some of the new diversity and equality requirements that have been put in, some of the new training, as you've heard, the woke issues surrounding the military. But military leaders have really pushed back on that. They said, look, it's a good economic environment that's often a bad recipe for the military. So they're hoping that some new incentives, some not just financial incentives, but some quality of life things, maybe sabbaticals, things like that, some new approaches might bring in some folks that traditionally haven't enlisted before.
And Lieutenant Colonel Davis, what issues would you say are most pressing for the military looking forward? If this pattern of low recruitment continues, how does the military reverse that or get through that in a way that does not hurt our ability at home or overseas and our military capacity?
Well, look, that's the most important thing. I mean, we have to make sure that we have the capacity to defend our country against any kind of an attack anywhere. And part of that has to be that we give missions to our military that they can handle without being too stressed. And the fact of the matter is that we are very spread out to the four winds right now. We have missions and operations going on really all over the globe, obviously quite a bit in the European area near the Ukrainian border, but then also still lots of missions in the Middle East and in Africa. We got to make sure that we don't spread ourselves too thin and try to do too many missions while also trying to build up in the Asia Pacific area, that we actually make ourselves less capable across the board. And at some point, we may have to be willing to say, hey, based on the number of troops that we actually have, we're going to have to start shedding some of these second and third order missions.
Leo, back to you. A recent poll by the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute found that trust and confidence in the military has dropped 20 points in the last 4 years. So what factors do you think have led the public to have this lack of confidence in the military?
Yeah, look, I think there's a perception that the military is getting more politicized. We saw this a lot during the Trump administration, some of the high-profile incidents. I'm thinking of the protests outside the White House where Chairman Milley walked out with the president, and there was this sort of scene that the military was connected to the Trump administration. The military leadership has been really cautious about this over the years, trying to make sure that the military is seen as apolitical, not belonging to either party. But as we've seen throughout the country, a lot of things have become politicized. A lot of things have become more partisan. So I think that's part of the drawdown. There's also just some unfamiliarity with the military. I mean, as much respect as there is out there, we're talking about a very small percentage of the country that actually serves and understands what military life is like. So that kind of disconnect can lead to some of the ups and downs in those respect numbers. If you don't really understand what it means to serve in the military, if you don't know anyone who's served in the military, it's a little bit harder to connect and understand what that life is about.
And Mr. Davis, I think as Americans, we respect our military. We understand they put their lives, that all of you put your lives on the line for the future of our country. But when you look at the erosion of trust, which is a through line throughout American life right now, the reasons for which, of course, are an open debate, but it is what it is. When it comes to the military, I do think people, I think Ukraine's easy to understand. We're fighting so that a sovereign country doesn't get invaded and against an adversary of this country in Vladimir Putin. But when we look at Iraq and Afghanistan, I think the average American doesn't quite understand what we really got out of that. How many lives were lost and shattered? And at the end, what did we have to show for it except a huge bill? So if we're losing confidence in our military in recent times, those two wars may be part of the reason, not to mention rampant sexual abuse and reforms that have just recently started, sexual assaults in our military. There are reasons that Americans lack confidence, but address some of those issues. What some people saw as needless wars and the sexual assault problem.
I think this is a much bigger issue than especially a lot of the leaders want to let on, and especially from the rank and file. And I've had direct experience with this from especially after my second combat tour into Afghanistan in 2012, where I wrote that many of our senior military leaders were just being outright deceptive to the American people, claiming success where there never was. And people can see these kinds of things. They're just patently obvious when the mission, especially in Afghanistan, just completely collapsed in 2021 for a lot of the reasons that I and several other people had been pointing out for over a decade. Then people have to say, wait a minute, our leaders kept telling us year after year things were getting better, that the Afghan government was being less corrupt. They were training their troops, and yet they saw graphically displayed that it collapsed in a moment. And a similar thing played out in Iraq in 2014 after, we were told for 8 years we had trained up the Iraqi troops, and then the ISIS came in and they just melted into the desert.
And that there were weapons of mass destruction.
After a while, people started saying, there's a problem here.
And on top of that, there were weapons of mass destruction, which were never found.
Well,
the whole.
Yeah, that's where it all started. That's
right.
Exactly right.
And Mr. Davis, I want to continue with Russia, because how has that war with Ukraine changed our military priorities? Is China still our biggest threat at this point?
Well, that again, it leads back to the point I made at the beginning here, that we got to make sure we're not overstretched. Right. That we have literally about 100,000 troops in Europe right now that are centered on the eastern flank of NATO, while we're simultaneously trying to build up forces in the Asia-Pacific area, while we're still trying to do the Middle East and the Africa missions. And we just can't do all that. And Americans got to say, hey, look, where is our interest threatened right now? That's where we need to put our interest in. And right now it's really not in the Europe, because look, the whole NATO. That's why we have NATO, a collective security that NATO needs to pick up the European component. A lot more of that, and a lot less of American troops need to be there, so that we don't get overstretched and that we don't find ourselves vulnerable in the Asia Pacific if, God forbid, the worst happens and we end up fighting China.
Mm. But America remains such a strong military that people want our resources and help no matter the situation. And more often than not, we give it to them. Leo, on the ground level, when you read about our veterans, whether it's depression, suicide, homelessness, addiction of some kind, it's hell for a lot of those men and women when they get back home and don't find the support that they need and, quite frankly, that they earned. What are the on-the-ground problems, and what is the reputation of the VA right now in helping them get through some of those issues?
Yeah, look, it's improving. It's important to note that there are plenty of folks who get out in the military and have struggles. There's plenty of folks who get out and don't have these struggles. They succeed, they get back into everyday life, and that gets back to some of the disconnect that a lot of Americans have with the military and veterans. I think there's a narrative out there that all veterans are broken, everybody comes back. A lot of them come back and are good, but the support services need to be there for the ones that really do struggle. And PTSD is a major issue. TBI, that's a traumatic brain injury from the recent wars, is a major injury there. So we've seen a lot of investment in VA over the years. We haven't always seen the results, and especially in things like veteran suicide, where this has been a focus for the last 10, 15 years of VA. The results have been mixed. There's been some slight improvements, but we're still seeing somewhere around 20 veterans and service members a day who take their lives, something that they really need to find some answers to. And it's going to take more than just VA. It's going to be an all of society issue to try and figure out how do we connect and how do we help these folks.
Man, just such a devastating stat there. But Leo, Shane, and Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, thank you both for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.